Good morning, everybody, and welcome to Forge, the Procurement Foundry Interactive Conference event, our first one. I'm so excited that you're all here. The attendees are starting to come into the first virtual session today. We've got a huge event lined up for you. We closed the registration last night at just about midnight, had some final folks coming in from overseas, and I think the final count on the attendees for today is somewhere around 500 registered attendees. Absolutely amazing. We're thrilled at the fact that with the exception of about 3 or 4 people, every single one of you is a practitioner. It's truly almost a 100% practitioner day of learning. We've got an amazing lineup for you today. I just wanted to go over some things with you before we get the day started. We're streaming live right now on LinkedIn as well, so hello to everybody on LinkedIn. We're excited to have you viewing our keynote speeches. Just a point on that, we will be live streaming our keynotes, but everything else is going to be based on the sessions that we've already broken out with the agenda today. So we've got, as I said, about over 500 virtual attendees. We've got 25 different speakers lined up for you today in 13 different sessions. Amazingly, we've got people coming in from around the world in about 15 different countries. We're going to start this morning off with an amazing keynote with Dr. Elouise Epstein and economist Johan Gott. We're really excited about that. As soon as I'm done rambling here with all of you, we're going to get them started. Then once the keynotes end, we're going to go into breakout sessions. You're going to go back into the Slack community and work with your interactive agendas to select the next event that you're in. And we'll do some housekeeping on that as well. And then we're going to have a lunch learning session where Mark Raffin from Content Callout, our primary sponsor for this event, he's going to be speaking at lunch, and we're also going to have Leanne Sanson from CSI talking more about integrated payables based on the feedback that we got from her webinar from a couple of weeks ago. Then we're right back into more breakout sessions. We're doing two at a time, so you've got choices on who and what you want to attend. And then finally, we'll wrap up at around 3 o'clock today with a fireside chat with Mark Raffin and I talking about just what's happening inside of the Procurement Foundry right now, and more importantly, where Procurement Foundry is going. So we're really excited to share some things with you. By all means, the 3:30 event is going to be huge. We've got some huge announcements for you. I just said huge twice, but that's okay. We've got some big announcements for you at the end of the day associated with where Procurement Foundry is heading, new things that we're working on, and I can't wait to share all of that with you. So just a reminder that this is a blended technology event, so we're now broadcasting live on Zoom. All of our sessions will be Zoom sessions with the exception of one, which I'll talk to you about in a minute, but we are using that in collaboration with Slack today. So we have 3 active Slack channels. They're locked down just for Forge members. So while this is all happening, we still have the Procurement Foundry going live in the background, and we have 100 channels of interactive content taking place inside of the Procurement Foundry at the same time. So all of our members are still continuing to conduct business. Our spend channels, people are still talking about spend. We're having a really, as you all know, we've got a real active conversation taking place in the topics agenda associated with COVID-19 and what's happening there. So while we're sitting in a virtual conference with 500 folks, we still have the larger community collaborating and discussing and having conversations. One programming note on that, today's Squad Up event that usually takes place in our peer-to-peer roundtable discussions on a daily basis has been canceled for the day in lieu of Squad Up. There will not be a Squad Up meeting today for the advertising and marketing Squad Up in the squad room for ad and marketing, so that those folks can attend the Forge event. So let me start by throwing out some thank yous. It has been a true labor of love to put together a virtual conference for about 500 attendees. and it has been extremely taxing at times. First and foremost, I want to thank, as you can see, I'm broadcasting live from my house. And as you can imagine, conducting and creating an event like this puts a lot of tax on a house. So first and foremost, I'd like to thank my wife and my kids for putting up with me over the last couple of weeks while we tried to get this whole thing together. It's been an amazing effort to date. It's been countless hours. I'd also like to thank Yasha Coffey, one of my co-founders of Procurement Foundry. I think Yash is watching us right now. So thanks to Yash for his support and his conversations and calls, his advice on how we should be doing all of this, and his unending support of the Procurement Foundry idea, the concept, the collaboration arena. Thanks, Yash. You're truly a friend and a peer on this thing. Next, we'd like to thank our steering committee. So for those of you who don't know, we've got a very active steering committee. Rendy Miller from Zendesk, who actually will be on one of the panel discussions today. Rendy's an amazing, and been with us since the start. Every one of our steering committee members, by the way, we've got the original steering members still in place from last year when we started this thing. Actually, it's only been 10 months, which we'll talk about. So Rendy Miller from Zendesk, Rudy Batts from Slack. Rudy will be speaking today as well in the 1 o'clock sessions. Elouise Epstein, who we're going to be kicking over to her very soon. She's on our steering committee and has been instrumental and talked me down off the bridge a couple of times during this, so thank you to her. Matt Anders, who is extremely active in our Squad Up events and is my primary go-to for everything IT. Thanks, Matt. Sabrina Traskis, who has been instrumental in helping us with some of the programs that we're going to be rolling out and discussing later on in the day. And then finally, Jay Schuyler for Hub International, it rounds out our steering committee. So all CPO and senior exec level folks helping me drive Procurement Foundry and come up with ideas so that we can make this community better for you. So next thing I'd like to, next thing that I would like to thank is all of the volunteers that make Procurement Foundry happen. We've got squad leaders. For those of you who don't know about the Squad Up initiative now, we've got a lot of information about Squad Up now with the daily peer-to-peer roundtable discussions. Larry Lung's been instrumental in that with our squad commander. Each one of those squads now has a squad leader. So thanks for the squad leaders who are handling the different silos. Monday is IT and Tuesday is ad and marketing, like we talked about. We've got squad leaders for every one of those sessions for the 1 hour session. So they start those up. And also special thanks goes out to our regional chapter leaders. We've got about 27 regional chapters now. And I never thought we'd actually get to this. It all started with a cocktail one day in Manhattan about 1.5 years ago. And now we've got 27 regional chapters who were meeting up physically. We've transitioned over to virtual very, very easily because we're a virtual community. And the virtual meetups take place inside of Procurement Foundry, inside of the different rooms. So wherever you're joining us from, we'd love to have you inside of your regional. Obviously, we've got some cross geographies now. And if you're interested in starting up a regional chapter, please reach out to Tina. Tina's our director of community development, and Tina will be happy to help you. Finally, a shout out to our partners from Content Callout. The marketing team's been amazing. Mark Raffin's team's been unbelievable. I can't thank them enough. This event doesn't happen without them. So thank you to them. All the information leading up to this event, they've taken care of. And also our broadcast partners at Let's Talk Supply Chain with Sarah Barnes Humphrey. And obviously, and we'll thank her much, much more as the day goes on, Tina Noble, who is really, as we discussed this morning, the real Mike Cadue. She's the person behind the scenes that makes this whole thing happen. So really quick from a housekeeping perspective, couple of scheduled changes for the day just for you all to denote. First off, the 12:15 to 12:45 session with Larry Lung that was supposed to be a Zoom session inside of your interactive agenda. Larry's session is actually being moved off of the Zoom agenda, and it's being moved into the support and feedback and support channel. So if you want to follow Larry along as he guides people through how to interact with Procurement Foundry and Slack, you will go into that feedback and support channel inside of Slack. Larry's opening up a Zoom meeting inside of that channel, and he'll be walking everybody through best and tips and tricks associated with how to navigate Slack. We did some stuff last night. He taught me some stuff I didn't even know, and I've been buried in Slack, so highly recommend that. Also, the lunch session with Leanne Sanson on integrated payables. We had to trim 15 minutes off of that, so it'll be a 30-minute session instead of a 45-minute session. And then finally, at the end of the day, we are closing this out at around 4 o'clock, and we are going to have virtual cocktails back in the networking lounge. In addition to the chat channel networking lounge, we're going to have 3 Zoom meeting lounges for you to come in and interact and say hello to everybody on. So you can chat and collaborate inside of the chat room, or you can go into one of the lounges. I will have a cocktail lounge, and I'll be bouncing around. Tina will have a cocktail lounge, and Larry Lung will have a 3rd cocktail lounge, because we can't have 500 people in one cocktail lounge. So really excited about that, and you will be able to see those invitations to the cocktail lounges and jump in and out of them inside of the networking lounge. One keynote on housekeeping: if you are going into the main lobby, so after all of these events, you're going back to the main lobby and pulling down your agenda and clicking on the next link to the next Zoom session that you want to go to, download that agenda. And we've got feedback and support open now, so you can ask questions inside of that channel, inside of that Slack channel. You want to download your interactive agenda so that you can click on those links and take you into those Zoom meetings. So I got 3 minutes left before I'm going to bring out Dr. Elouise and Johan. I just wanted to tell you a little bit about the amazing journey that Procurement Foundry has been on so far. Right now, as we stand today, we're just about broaching 3,000 members in a fully vetted 100% buy-side only community. We do have some partner channels coming online, but as you all know, the partner channels, they can only stay in their channels. So we have, as of this morning, we have 100 channels of collaboration content taking place with over 3,000 procurement and supply chain management practitioners, and it's all free. That's the amazing part. That was the vision from the start, and we're happy to keep doing that. Our goal here is to make sure that regardless of what questions you have, somebody out there probably has the answer, and we certainly don't want something financially like dues or membership dues to burden us all with trying to collaborate and get better information. Come collaborate, gather, collaborate, share, and grow are our mottos, and we're really excited that we've been able to do that. And we're only 10 months old. That's the amazing part. We've got 7,000 followers now on LinkedIn. Again, thank you to the content team for that amazing growth. And we've got almost 30,000 original posts in 10 months. So that's a searchable index of 30,000 posts. If you're not searching Procurement Foundry right now, you need to be searching Procurement Foundry to find out all the content that's in there. More than likely, there's already been a conversation that started on topics that you want. And it's just amazing to us. Probably sometime very soon, we'll be sitting on one of the largest repository of unstructured data around supply chain management and procurement in the history that's readily available to vetted practitioners. So that's saying something. And we're in 51 countries right now. Like I said, we got 21 regional chapters. We're doing 5 integrated squads. We'll talk more about squads later. And we are growing quickly. We have a lot of supply chain people. Just yesterday, we had another 100 people join up, probably because of Forge, obviously, but we're excited to have all of our new members in here as well. And that's it. That's everything for me for the day. I'm really excited about bringing all this content to you. We're recording every one of these sessions, so we'll be able to digest it. So if you have to miss something to go to a meeting, we'll get you back, okay? Thanks, and have a great day. Dr. Elouise is coming on now. Hi, Doc. Good to see you. And Johan. And I'm going to jump out of here and let you thrill the audience and our live LinkedIn Live stream members. So thanks, Doc. Nice to meet you, Johan. Have a great day and enjoy, everybody.
Thank you, Mike. It's an absolute pleasure to be here. I've been on this journey with Mike and the rest of the team, and this has been an awesome ride. And like Mike said, it's only been 10 months. Actually, I think I've only been involved for like 6 months. And I just want to say thank you to all of you, and thank you for having both Johan and I. We're excited. We're going to have fun today, or at least Johan and I will have fun. I don't know about anybody else. I'm coming to you from Henderson, Nevada, and I'd like to introduce Johan, and we're going to introduce each other just to keep things moving. Johan and I worked together at Carney for 15 years, and he is probably one of the smartest people I know. He's affably known within the firm as the professor. He just has that way about him. I think you'll see that come through. And he's my go-to person for all things macro disruption, which is kind of convenient because he left the firm last year and started his own macro disruption consulting firm. So he's got great information, great content, and I admire him a lot. And yeah, so I'm excited to talk to Johan today in this session. Go ahead, Johan.
Yeah, and thank you so much, Elouise. I think not everything was perhaps fully accurate in the description and maybe a bit too nice, but very honored to be here as well. Thank you very much for having me at this event. And as Elouise said, I'm definitely looking forward to start this off with some fun. But first, I just want to give a couple of bio points on Dr. Elouise Epstein, who was kind enough to introduce me just a second ago. She's a vice president at Carney, where we both worked. I believe she has a few more years on me than I did there, even though I was there for 15 years. So that's quite impressive. And she is a digital futurist and a procurement thought leader. And I would say, and I don't think that's a lot of dispute about that in the firm either, that she is one of the premier thought leaders in the firm around procurement topics, which is to say quite something given how many professionals, procurement professionals are in Carney. So, and what that really means is sort of in a day-to-day life, really helping clients to get on the new trends, start to adapt their practices to be more ready for the future as it's coming. There is also a bit of a hidden history and hidden life of Elouise. And that is, not only is she a procurement thought leader, she also holds a PhD in political and military history, which I'm sure is great in the role as futurist, not just to have the one perspective of the industry that you're working in, but able to sort of switch in and out of different things. And finally, look out for the new book that is called Disruptive Procurement, Winning in a Digital World, that is coming here in a couple of months with Dr. Elouise Epstein as the author.
Thank you, Johan. That was very nice of you, and you'll get your check in the mail next week for saying such nice things. Okay, so let's jump into it. We're going to try not to offend everybody. Mike has worked so hard to build this community. I'm going to try not to tear that down in the next 45 minutes. So by making political side jabs, what are we learning about the COVID crisis so far, Johan? In your perspective, just broadly speaking, let's start with the elephant in the room.
Yeah, I mean, I think we're learning quite a bit. I think first of all, we have learned that almost everyone can serve as an epidemiologist. Almost everyone can be a futurist. We have certainly seen that. That's been a key learning. I think there's also learnings about what people's homes look like, what their pet looks like, and their children that we can see on Zoom. But I think most importantly, and for each organization, it is really fundamentally different how they have been impacted by the COVID. It is unique that everyone has been impacted severely, but everyone almost in its own individual way. But I think one of the things that is applicable here is one of the things that Warren Buffett said. When the tide goes out, we can see who has been swimming without a bathing suit. Meaning who has not been prepared, who's kind of sort of taken advantage of the good times and not fully prepared for the bad times. This is really when we see organization being stress tested, who can adapt quickly and who is still in the planning phase to sort of take this hit on, right? Even though a lot of people could not necessarily have predicted this.
So let me jump in there. So I would hypothesize that we have seen a lot of people without bathing suits, or we're starting to see a lot of people, or we're seeing a lot of bathing suits on the beach. And so maybe when the tide goes out, we're have a lot of fun with this one.
Correct.
I think there's a lot of naked people swimming in the ocean. So I guess, can you talk about that? And I mean, it's not just like a handful. It's not 10%. It's not, people or companies on the margin. It feels like it's a large chunk of the companies in the economy that are swimming without bathing suits.
Yeah, and I certainly agree with that. And to a certain degree, we might need to give them a pass, right? The COVID-19 severity is not something we've seen since, 1919, perhaps. But I think even already before COVID appeared, a lot of signs that the global economy was becoming increasingly risky on many levels. And I think what has been striking to me, I did a lot of work during they're still ongoing, the trade war with China that the Trump administration is involved in, 25% tariff on most imports from China, as most of you are keenly aware. And I think what was so striking to me was how companies had a difficult time sort of changing their stance from old world of increasing globalization, falling tariffs, to new world with high risks of increasing tariffs. And to me, it's sort of was a bit of a mental model. If you think of the black swans that was so popular, the sort of high impact, low likelihood event that are really disruptive. I think if you look at the trade wars, they certainly were, if you look 10 years ago. But what is so interesting is that there's what we call a gray swan period, right? Where they go from being high impact, low likelihood to high impact, relatively high likelihood. And I think this is where companies really struggle to adapt their mental model and start now tracking this as one of the most serious risks affecting them.
So let me there's a lot to unpack there. So the gray swan event, I think if you look over the last 20 years, there's so many disruptions, and everything from the tariffs to tornadoes to fires to and granted those tend to be localized, but we're starting to see more global impact events. Can we really give companies a pass? And maybe it's, maybe it's a collective, right? I mean, I certainly would like to and often blame consultants and technology providers. But I mean, I think don't we have to rewrite the operating model for business to operate with gray swan events and be prepared for black swans? Is that a good learning? Is that fair?
No, I think so. I mean, I think the breadth and severity of COVID-19 may not be the type of event you should be prepared for or let's hope not, on a sort of every 2-year basis. But at the same time, again, the world we're operating in is not the world we used to operate in a number of years ago. Again, with ever increasing globalization, ever falling freight prices, ever falling tariffs, more free trade zones, more collaboration. That's the world I don't think we are moving forward into. So no, I agree with you. We should not give a full free pass here, because there's a lot that we could anticipate that a lot more is going to happen.
Well, and let me, add to that, right? Like a lot of our businesses in these enterprises and sort of operating models were built in the post-World War II era, where you had a certain set of government, institutions, you had NGOs, you had, things like the, World Economic Forum and all these, organizations. And I don't think, or I will hypothesize and ask for your feedback on this, how, but post-2000, when we have the quote unquote world flattening and this new globalization, and where most enterprises are, really act like private equity firms, and they acquire and divest, frequently to grow. And then there's a large proportion, I forget what the number is, but it's a high number of companies that are under private management. So, I mean, I guess the world that we are living in and operating in is no longer this post-World War II, make America great again, era. So how do we change for this? I mean, well, let me ask that question. How do we change?
Right. No, Yeah, no, I think you're absolutely right. I mean, I think with the fall of Berlin Wall in 89 and then the acceleration of globalization, the question was more, what country should I go to next, either from a market access or from a supply chain, production-based point of view. Companies became global. Almost all, even relatively small manufacturing companies have operations now overseas, predominantly in China. And it's been a wonderful development, both for the global economy, but also, of course, for all the countries around the world that has been given the opportunity to become exporters, earn foreign revenue, develop their economies. Poverty is falling. It's been a wonderful period on sort of both ends of the spectrum. But again, sadly, I think we're seeing that fracturing now. I think what companies need to do is to involve that lens as well in their future planning. This is, of course, not the end all be all, but I think as important, for example, in a procurement context, as supplier risk, as reputation risk, I think now macro risk needs to sit, sort of have that seat at the table, have that voice, and be treated as not just something we sort of read in the newspaper and, you know, hope that we pick up the biggest things and can incorporate it, but systematically starting to mapping those risks, and in particular tracking when they go from the black swan type probability to the gray swan before they become the white swans that sort of that hit us at the in the tunnel.
So, all right. So one more sort of question on this, on risk, and then just a reminder to everybody, we have the Q&A open. Mike's looking at the Q&A, so if you want to fire any questions in, we'll do Q&A at the end. I forgot to mention that. We're going to move on from COVID here, but before we do, can we actually give people a pass on, our companies a pass on pandemic as a risk model, or at least we cannot give consultants and technology vendors a pass for not modeling pandemic, because it's not like it's unknown. And so I guess my provocative statement is any consultant that's done a risk model in the last 10 years, if they've done one for you and it didn't include pandemic, you should ask for a refund. I guess the question is okay, it's one thing to give people a pass, but can we, I mean, we really, I think pandemics might become a new normal, not the new normal, but, you know, like if it's not this bacteria, it might be something else. Can you comment on that?
Yeah, and in a sense, so yeah, it's not even the new normal, it is the normal. If we look back, it wasn't necessarily a totally unexpected event that a virus would appear in China in particular and sort of start spreading a new virus that science didn't have answers to. We have seen this several times, SARS most notably. I think SARS is very much on the radar in East Asian countries, where it was not as much on the radar and largely forgotten in the Western world. And I think that's one of the reasons why you see the responses in the Asian nations be much more quicker and much more effective than you saw in Europe and United States, for example. But I think that also what we, in this particular epidemic, and also, I mean, I think we should also notice, as you said, it's not like nobody has predicted, as Bill Gates has been talking for years about epidemic being the most predictable human catastrophe coming for us. But in this particular case of COVID-19, I think also here, both governments and companies were blindsided when they shouldn't have been. From the announcement in New Year's Eve, I believe it was, in China, that this was spreading in Wuhan, they're closing down one of the biggest cities and one of the biggest industrial centers in the country. All the warning bells should be ringing at that point, right? It is not a certainty that it will spread to other countries and the rest of the world, but it is a very high likely event with very high impact. And I think we talk a lot about the government response, but I think we also saw the company responses lacking in those 2 to 3 months that was available to make preparations.
Yeah, so the question as a historian that I can guarantee you will come over the next couple decades is who knew what and when. And that comes up after every catastrophe. So let's move away from COVID for a moment. We will come back to it in the Q&A. I see some questions coming in, so I promise we will get back to and address those. What are other macro disruptors? We're all focused on COVID. It's like COVID. Okay, we got it. You know, but I feel like the bigger risk might be, and so I'd like to test this with you, the bigger risk might be, what are we not looking at that once COVID gets solved, or we get some sort of vaccine, Lysol or otherwise, what should we be worried about? I made you laugh.
Yeah, I think the most impactful quote I've seen on this is, I think it was Dominique Moissy in Paris and Sciences Po, who said, we're going to, in 2021, hopefully we will sort of be exiting out of the COVID emergency, and we're going to discover that it is the year 2030. Yeah. Meaning that in this time where everyone is incredibly focused on survival, and rightly so, right? Like maintaining cash flow, keeping your people safe, keeping operations working as best possible. During this time, the events and the trends that were visible already in the 2019 era or before that are really accelerating. The pressure on the system as now is so high that the small fractures and fissures that we saw are now starting to become bigger cracks. But we're not seeing them necessarily again. We're so preoccupied with short-term planning.
So can you elaborate on some of those fissures and how they're manifesting?
Right. So we're tracking sort of economics, politics, consumer behavior, and domestic politics. And in each of these, we see very large coming developments. If we start with international politics, and I think I alluded to it earlier, if you look at the past 25 years, the era that we described, Davos man, unprecedented global growth, the big story there was the US-China economic relationship. That was sort of the engine of that world. China as the manufacturing powerhouse of the world, which is quite a reversal from if you think China in the 1970s with a GDP that was, even with 1 billion people, much smaller than many industrial countries. Now China is the undisputed manufacturing powerhouse. And this relationship has been under stress for quite some time. And the most obvious, but also somewhat distracting thing has been the trade wars, the Trump's pressure on China, including 25% tariffs, which is also unprecedented. In the biggest trading relationship in the world, you now have 25% tariffs. We haven't seen this since, 1920s, those kind of numbers. It's quite extraordinary. But it also hides a bigger reality of an increasing conflict between US and China on many arenas. One is manufacturing, another one is technology. Obviously, there's a military aspect. And so all these things are starting to crack. Maybe this is a good time to ask you about what you think about the military aspect, which is sort of the most alarming of them all.
Well, one, you should know I'm a pessimist. Two, I like to quote Leon Trotsky as war is the locomotive of history, because I think that plays out, and especially in the United States, is only 250 years, give or take. We've been involved, in a lot of wars, especially more recently. We have an entire generation that has grown up, with the wars in the Middle East. And I think, well, one, I don't think economically those are sustainable, but I do think that we are continually being attacked by China, by Russia. If you look closely at cyber, it's not just bullets flying. And sometimes in war, we get locked into what we used to, the war we just fought is the one we're preparing for, not the one we're about to go into. Mm. And you see that from World War II to Vietnam, through Korea to Vietnam, where we try to bring this very conventional, I'm not sure why I'm going on this tangent, but since you asked, I'm going to keep going. But you end up in Vietnam, the American presence there, with World War II equipment and ideologies. And so I think what we're facing now coming out of the global war on terror is a focus on deploying special forces to hotspots all over the world, when in fact, actually, we're really under cyber attack, not just our political institutions, but the military is under cyber attack continually. And our infrastructure is under attack, and by the way, we are perpetuating attacks too. So and whether that's good or bad is not for me to judge. Each of us can make that own decision. But so I do think we're at war, and when the other factor in war is when economies collapse, when natural materials become, or commodities become hard to get, people become more aggressive, and I think you can see a very aggressive posture in some countries. So, so I think in terms of macro disruption, I think war is a very likely outcome at some point. I think it's just in our human nature.
That was certainly a quite pessimistic take, even more pessimistic than I think I am. But I think we should all ask ourselves: is this a plausible scenario? A kind of perhaps a worst case scenario, but what are the middle layers between where we are now and what Elouise is just describing, and how are we going to maintain our supply chain if a lot of manufacturing happens in China under these circumstances? Same with the market access. Are we going to have the access to these billion plus consumers under these circumstances? Those things are not at all certain, right?
So let me ask the question came by, I saw a moment ago, but can we really get into a war, or any really long-term trade war with China, if or any other country for that matter, that we heavily leverage that we're tied to economically? I mean, is that even possible? And so then I guess the question comes is, do we need to think about reshoring, or does that become a trend, or deglobalization?
Right. Yeah. So, the answer is yes. We've been in a trade war with China now or the U.S. has been in a trade war with China now for 2 years. The first tariffs came in June of 2018, 10%, then 25%, and then the entire import flow. So that is certainly possible. And what's happened is, and I think it's quite striking, actually, in the latest Carney reshoring report that I happened to pick up, which I was working on before I left. The most striking results came out just after I left, which is disappointing because it would have been a fun story. But what we're really seeing is a massive diversification, not as a reshoring move, but a diversification from China move. To see the percentage of Chinese imports to the US expressed from the total of low-cost countries in Asia has gone down from the mid-60s to now we're like in the low 50s%. So what's happening is that companies have taken notice. They have started to diversifying, and again, probably not in response to major shooting war, but to this economic conflict that is so evident. Plus, of course, increased Chinese labor rates at the same time, which you also need to take into consideration. But I think what's happening now, if 10, 15, 20 years ago was we're moving to China, the question now is, what is our next production base? What is our next, where do we find our next labor pool? And there is no country like China, which has that size of population, that quality of the infrastructure, that know-how in manufacturing, and that government support for that sector. So the answer is going to be much, much more complicated than it was when the decision was, should we stay in the US or go to China?
So let's double click on that, and because this is a question from LinkedIn, and by the way, I will post the reshoring report somewhere. We'll figure that out, but or it's on Carney's website. But let's double click on the supply chain. What about food? Because it's one thing to look for low cost labor in other countries, but what about, farming? Beef, pork, poultry, vegan meat. Because I'm vegan. How do you deal with like that? Because that's not just a simple commodity that you can move from place to place.
Yeah, I think the food supply chain is very interesting, and there was also large debates in the White House whether NAFTA should be discontinued, right? It was described as the worst trade deal in history. Then they managed to come up with a renegotiation that was much less dramatic than I think anybody had anticipated. So that was welcome news. But that's really where the food supply chain plays out in an international environment. If you look at where the US food imports come, Canada and Mexico are huge partners here. And the US, of course, also big agricultural powerhouse, right? And those supply chain is so interlinked, right? So I think when people heard the end of NAFTA, they were thinking of Mexican auto workers. They were thinking of, I don't know, Canadian something, softwood lumber, I think people talk about a lot. But what they really should have been thinking about was the impact on the food, because also tariffs on agriculture products quite high. So that was a serious concern to the US, not food security, but food prices, to be sure, and highly underappreciated. So I think that's an interesting sort of close to home perspective on the food supply chain.
All right, so let's start to move to what do we do about this? Like, how do we think about this? So we all have day jobs. After virtual Thanksgiving and virtual Christmas, we will eventually go back to work. How do we take this back to our day-to-day jobs in procurement and supply chain?
Yeah, I think there's a couple of answers to that. I think what we're seeing now is, again, an extraordinary array of events that happen every day. It's almost like the news have been impossible to read because there's so much in it. And it's each day's newspaper have headlines that would be a month, a year almost in the past. So all companies are now making lots and lots and lots of decisions. And they have to, by necessity, to survive. But at the same time, I think there's like two things to keep in mind, and all these things are happening. One is what we're just saying, that as we're fixing all these all these immediate questions, the long-term questions are literally growing in importance outside of our vision. And also, as I think, quoting Winston Churchill here after Trotsky,
we are totally nerds, by the way. We're like, this
I would say never waste a good crisis, is a quote from Churchill. This is the time to make the long-term decisions, because so many decisions are taken anyway. So to make sure that those decisions are something we feel comfortable with 5 years from now is very important. Second, this is also a license to make those decisions. So to me, this is the time to start thinking about the 5 to 10 year trends and incorporate them into the short and medium term decisions that are being taken today.
Okay, but as an economist, let me throw this right back at you, because for the last, I don't know, 5-10 years, it's been all cost, right? Nobody wants to talk about risk. Risk is this kind of like thing off the center. We have a COE, or we have some tool or some consultant, and we've checked the box, and we're not worried about long-term long-term strategy. We want short-term, market-focused, slaves to Wall Street kind of decisions. We want the stock price to go up on the quarterly. So we do things like just-in-time supply chains. We do, we don't incorporate risk modeling into our day-to-day purchasing decisions. We don't, it's just all, how do we pull cost out quickly? And so, I mean, that's a big shift, right? Like that's a intellect, like that's the Titanic. You don't just like slam on the brakes, and I'm not sure how I got that, but I think, can we just like, that's got to be, if you're the CEO of a company, a multinational company, all of a sudden shifting from cost savings to, risk and long-term investments, that seems scary, or would, to me at least.
Right, and I think cost should absolutely be the focus. I think what has happened, the changes that we've seen, is that risk have become cost.
Yeah.
Part of the avoiding cost is avoiding risk, because these risks that we're talking about come with significant economic impact on companies. I don't remember the exact number, but going through the annual reports in 2019 from companies, company after company reported millions of dollars in losses from tariffs, right? Not all of that was avoidable, but a fair amount was, and would have led to more cost savings, competitive advantage to competitors, etc. So that is really what I think, and nobody wants to plan for this. But again, I think as Leo Trotsky said, you might not be interested in war, but war is interested in you.
Yeah, but so that's great. So, but even if you set those things in motion, the average tenure of a CEO, these initiatives will outlast that person. So how do you make that? How do you get the boards to think about? And I know that everybody will be softened up after this crisis, but still, that's a big shift in how we operate, is it not?
Yeah, and it's a huge shift. It is a big shift in mindset that I think has not fully been present in organizations. And that's organizations all the way from the top, all the way through the system, both in terms of the C-level, but also the operational people on the operational front lines that also have not had the mandate to spend money on hypothetical, in a sense, risks, right? And I think also there's a disconnect between the C-suite, which does have a relatively keen sense of tracking risks, but not necessarily a way to communicate and get that feedback for organizations. So in a sense, I think the C-level is the lower problem here. I think those are the ones with real concern. I think it hasn't translated down into the right signals into the rest of the organization to track this in a way that is not at the Davos C-level, but it is in a tangible, this is what it means for our companies in real dollars. And I think that's when that equation starts to fall in place. Again, the Davos conversation, that's all good, but when you can actually talk about value at risk in our company, in these pretty plausible scenarios, I think that's when you start to get a very different mindset.
All right, so let me ask you the question I've been dying to ask you for weeks. We're a lot of multinational, global, big companies are represented in Procurement Foundry, and these small and medium-sized businesses make up a large chunk of our supply base, even in tier 2, tier 3, tier 4, even if they're subcontracted through the tier 1s. So that's a large portion of the economy that is facing massive disruption from this. And a lot of these smaller suppliers, let's just call it the SMBs, are likely going to find themselves in financial trouble, canceled contracts and so forth, which could be a huge drag on the economy. So that's one question, one part of the question. And the other is what do the folks here that are listening in, what do they do, and how should they start to think about that? Because these are the suppliers they negotiate with. These are the suppliers that they have to manage and either find alternatives if they go out of business or help stave off that. So if you can answer from both those.
Yeah, I mean, I think there's no doubt that we're going to see a wave of bankruptcies and failures. I think government is trying to save companies, but there is no way that they're going to be saving even the majority of the small and medium enterprises, right? That doesn't have necessarily a strong voice in Washington or ability to absorb the kind of losses at the kind of time frame we're talking about here. And that's really bad news for the economy, but also for us as customers, whether we are personal customers or customers as large corporations. It is reminiscent of what my colleague George calls the Japanification of the economy, meaning that Japan has this zombie economy, which is characterized by a few things: low growth and bad demographics, which I think we're looking at as well. But I think most concerning is the lack of small and medium enterprises in a country like Japan, which is like really stifled innovation and competition. So I think that's going to be much harder to rebuild a vibrant economy, as the companies that are left are the big behemoths that we know are not the best innovators. But as us as customers in procurement, we're going to have fewer choices. Those are going to have more negotiation power, less incentive to innovate, and so on and so forth, right? So yes, it's a good thing that they have more financial muscle to withstand a crisis, but it is really a bad thing to see what I believe going to be the consolidation of that landscape as well.
Right. Okay, so I think at this point we can move over to Q&A because I'm sure there's some good questions. And by the way, if we don't get to your questions now, you can DM either Johan or me. I'm always happy to debate the Civil War or World War II or the failure in Vietnam. And Johan, as you can probably tell, we'll talk macroeconomics all day. So Mike, I think you're there on standing by with some Q&A questions to lob over the fence. Or not. All right, well, oh, there he is.
Yeah, Doc, I'm sorry. I'm back looking in the scenes. We got a lot of questions coming in both on LinkedIn Live as well as in the panel. So let's start with one. What are the key items that companies should be preparing and addressing short term for the next pandemic COVID wave that is predicted later this year? And what are the top areas long term?
You want to start with that one, Johan?
Right. So here comes, I guess, my career as an epidemiologist. It's very hard, I think, for anyone to predict what is the next wave, when is it going to happen. It depends on so many factors. It's really difficult. And I think what is most striking to me is the unanticipated consequences. So to me, it's hard to give advice to any specific companies because A, the impacts are so diverse, and B, again, they're so unanticipated. To me, it's all about sort of not letting your eyes off the ball or the finger off the pulse or whatever, to keep looking out for these things and a time frame that is alien to most companies, right? This is not long-term trend spotting. This is literally what's happening next week. But somebody who is looking at this in a very active fashion to help, again, probability is increasing. Are we able to withstand a shock like this? What can we do in like 7, 14, 21 days to make our response better? Very interesting case, a grocery chain in Texas, name slips me right now, had one person on staff to look at what is happening around in the environment that we need to prepare for. They had already started when the lockdown started in March and the panic started spreading in March, already started to prepare in terms of what products are likely to go on our shelves, etc. They were actually prepared. They've increased stocks. They were able to maintain sales even in that kind of shortage economy. That is the kind of like relatively short-term preparations that I think we can all do now.
So comments from Jonathan and Farah, it was HEB, and Anthony, it was HEB. So I love this chat.
That's right. That is right.
As HEB. I also would add to that, from looking at from a digital point of view, is it's not just risk monitoring, but it's pairing the monitoring with the strategy and the actions you should take. And when you apply that sort of lens to a very, day-to-day, weekly, it becomes very powerful. And I think that's, if you've heard, anybody that's heard me speak about that, I think that's a big failure too in the system. So I would also encourage people to look at it from a solutioning point of view. All right, Mike, hit us with the next one.
Sure, Doc. I got another question from LinkedIn Live. What industries, this is a magic 8-ball question for you, what industries will disappear after the pandemic?
Ooh, this is good. Go ahead, Johan.
Oh, that is good. Let's see. What I do think is, for decades, and this is not news, we talked about the rise of digital and how every company has to be digitalized. There's been talked about so much that it is an empty platitude at this point. And I'm sure Elouise recognized this, that, keep being said. But at the same time, it's almost equally true that most companies really haven't fully incorporated that knowledge and wisdom. And I think to the degree that companies haven't done that, I think they're in big trouble. We're seeing that right now in the retail sector, in particular, big department stores being incredibly hard hit, and are they going to be able to turn around even in a post-COVID scenario? I think for all those companies that haven't really fully taken advantage of the opportunity that digital does for remote delivery, for serving customers in new ways, I think that's big trouble.
So I think I would add that I was actually interviewed late last year about the future supply chain in 2050. And I think the biggest impediment from now to 2050 is these legacy ERP systems. And I have a whole rant, which I will not, you can read about it. But I think the fact that companies have 10, 20, 60, 120 ERP systems, that's not how they were designed, which means you're seeing the shockwave effect that failure, that's not digital, that's like chaos. And so I think until we can get our arms around that, and that's probably, I don't know, I think I'll retire before tackling that problem, but that I think is probably really holding the digitization back. I would just add one question sort of back to you. In some ways though, it has an Amazon and Instacart and some of these companies, and even what HEB did, right? Aren't they constraining supply, and in some ways, aren't they doing a central planning function? Because they're determining who can get food and delivery when, right? And they're determining who can get food. I mean, that seems like if we wanted to, get the government out of day-to-day life, is that going the other way? And, like Amazon, it controls, well, at least my life. So can you respond?
Right. We went from Amazon Prime members getting things within 24 hours to getting it in 30 days if it's non-essential.
Yeah.
It's quite a shift. So, I mean, I think to your point, this raises a lot of questions about the involvement of government in the economy, right? One is food supply, another obvious one is healthcare, access to health, I think is the one that really is on everyone's mind. But I think a crisis like this is again reinforcing that who is making these hard decisions. And, and I think we're sort of, it's always it's a conflict between less government and sort of, in a sense, more efficient economy, or more government and more safety, right? And my biggest question coming out of this is, where are we going to land, right? Is this a big government type thing, which, in certain areas may be very good policy, but it also has incredible challenges for companies when governments start to take a big role. And I think that's another thing we need to be prepared for. We talked about, China, US, but I think domestically, the big question, which also already was a trend. I mean, Bernie Sanders, Elizabeth Warren, etc. Even Joe Biden to a certain degree. I mean, big government is certainly on the agenda. And coming out of COVID, what is big government going to look like? Very interesting question.
Right, because I think it's not only food, and as you said, healthcare, and that's probably going to impact, going back to what industries are going to go away. Well, the reverse of that is the industries that will get, a lot of intense growth, and certainly healthcare, both upstream in the med devices, pharma, manufacturing, obviously for a vaccine, but downstream for the healthcare providers, because I think that too has been a real shock. Mike, can we squeeze in one more quick question?
Yeah, we've got 2 minutes left, so quick question, quick answer. How will lots of questions around bringing production back near shore? How will companies be evaluating the risk with primarily being with a China production environment? How do we potentially view, and what are your thoughts are on bringing near shore back to offset some of the risk?
Go ahead, Johan. You can close it out.
Yeah, I mean, in that question, I think there's really, companies are faced with, if they were surveying from China, basically 3 alternatives, right? One is a country similar to China, to call it the Vietnam and Indonesia and India. Long-term Africa is where future labor pools are. We're looking at nearshore Mexico, places like that, already rising very rapidly in terms of US investment into manufacturing. And then I think the real big question here is automation. How much can we leverage automation to bring things back even onshore to the US, to Europe, closer to customers? So I think the question is not just between different countries, it's also in the mix between humans and robots in a sense to make those decisions.
Great.
Critical question.
Yeah. So I think, so we are right on time, Mike. I just wanted to say thank you, Johan, for doing this with me. This is always fun to talk to you. Just to everybody out in the community, you can DM on Slack, Johan or me, if you want questions. We're both kind of upward towards boomers. So sometimes following all these threads, or at least me. Anyway, so, but if you want to, engage with us, feel free to, we, as you can probably tell, love talking about this stuff. So thank you, Mike, and I'll kick it back to you for some logistics and we'll go from there.